Waste Services, Bethlehem, come speak to the board.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll keep this short since we started quite a little late. I think the last time I came and talked to the board, we were constructing and looking for operational approval. Obviously, early this year, we received operational approval for stage 6. We are operating in stage 6, which gives us capacity through the end of 2026. As you know, our agreement goes to 2023. The capacity of stage 6 is a little over 1 million cubic yards. Through the permit, it has stated that the capacity, or stage 6, is phases 1 through 6, and our annual capacity is 230,200 cubic yards per year, which is much lower than what we would typically receive for the state of New Hampshire, but that's in the permit, so that's where what we're currently allowed to accept. We do have an appeal pending, COF valid appeal of stage 6. That is scheduled for February of next year. I forget what the exact date, but February next year. Again, we're already operating in stage 6, but there is an appeal pending. Any questions on stage 6 operational? No, that's good. Next, what we were going to talk about. What was next on the agenda?
Legislation regarding proposed Dalton Landfill.
Yeah, so there's a flurry of legislation related to solid waste in New Hampshire, more than typical. I advise everybody to really kind of keep track of that. There are several bills, as there were last year. The language is not, as you know, there's bills proposed, but the language is not clarified. But there are several bills that are presently being presented that will attempt again to either solve or stop the permitting process of the Dalton project. I can't speak to the specifics because I don't know the language, but as those things develop, I would just suggest we all look at those. There's a lot of other things out there, right? Which there should be. Diversion, as you know, we're looking at the rules, rewriting the rules. There's currently a committee working on solid waste from the legislators from last year. So it's an exciting year for solid waste. Everybody should be really paying attention, and your input, because you guys are doing with it on the ground on a daily basis, would be highly appreciated. It seems to be there's a lot of people today that know a lot more about waste than we do. But we deal with it every day. We know what the issues are. We have tried to solve the issues, and I think together we continue to move forward and solve the issues. But we have to literally pay attention. But a lot of people have input that really do not know our industry like we do. I can't speak specifically to those, but again, I could send a list. I could send a list of all the different ones. There's quite a few out there. And lastly
Is the district's waste contract.
district waste contract. So as I stated, it is till 2023. I know it's early probably to discuss that contract, but we would be willing to open that discussion if the board would entertain that. You guys should talk about that. We would love to continue the partnership. We're in year 7 of a 10-year agreement, and we'd be willing to extend that agreement in some simple form throughout the life of NCES, if you guys would be willing to discuss that. Obviously, we can't talk about the specifics right now, but I think with the capacity shortfall and the difficulties of getting into facilities because they're at capacity, I think it's important that we all look long range as long as we can with the remaining capacity, and we would like you guys to be on board for the remaining life of that facility. It's close, it's convenient. You guys got a really good price. Transportation costs are good. You know, if you don't go up there at any other distance, no matter which one you pick, if you can get in, the distance is gonna be longer. And you take us out of the market, the prices are gonna change. I mean, there are studies out there what the economic impact is once, as you know, once more capacity goes offline. All those dynamics change. And they're moving targets. I mean, as you know, what we say today is not the same next year, 3 years from now, 4 years from now. But we all see the trucking industry, difficulty the trucking industry has. And for us in the north, to take anything, if you're not going north, you gotta go south before you can go west. And trucking is very difficult. We're seeing shortfalls and difficulty finding disposal in our own transfer stations now also, so.
I'm having difficulties just moving, material and it's, I'll send a bid out and it'd be 2-3 weeks before I can even truck it. So yes,
Absolutely. It's really tough to move anything, and we're seeing and hearing of wait lines 6-7 hours at disposal facilities. We're hearing of facilities closing at noon because they're at capacity. I mean, that stuff is happening. Right now, the towns that are going to the North Country have a good deal. I mean, there's the volume is down, the capacity is limited. People are in and out. It's if you talk to the guys that are moving in and out of us, it's really a nice little deal right now. But it only lasts till 2026, so things will change drastically when that happens. So I just would highly suggest that the board have that discussion if they want to open those negotiations. Like I said, I know it's early, but things are going to be tight quicker than later. So if we can continue that, I think we've had a great partnership, and again, the company is willing to keep it on this pretty much extended agreement instead of doing anything radical with it. If you guys would entertain that.
What is the exact end date of the contract? Do you know, Kevin?
2023?
Right, but it's
April or May.
April, May, yeah. Okay.
I have it right here. I think it's. Wow, that's hard to see on my glasses. It is April.
That April 1 or April 3rd? Or it doesn't matter.
It's 2023, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Is there any more comments from the district?
I just had something from my public works. They just tore a big building down in Littleton. And the contractor was assuming he could come to the Bethlehem site, and he was told that you guys had reached your C&D limit. So they ended up having to take it to a place that does C&D processing, and then go to somewhere else further down south, which raised the cost by exponentially of the project. Do you have a C&D cap, like monthly or yearly, or?
So we have a cubic yard in place limit.
Just cubic yards.
Yeah.
Across the board.
So it's new to us. Turnkey Rochester was the first permit to be managed by cubic yards. We were the second, stage 6 was the second permit in the state to be managed by cubic yards. It's new to us. It's kind of difficult, it's in place, but then there's site settlement. So we're doing quarterly. We're down to really every 2 weeks right now. We're doing monthly and quarterly drone surveys to really try to manage that, to hit that 230,200 cubic yards. So with that said, we had to, when we did the quarterly survey, we had to displace some volume in order to maintain capacity for the members in our contracts, which meant if it If it was an event job, you know, if it was some kind of big tear down job like that, we just didn't have the capacity. Starting January 1, we'll have the capacity and we can start managing that again. So I talked to Scott and I mentioned that to him. He had called me today, Scott Samsonite, and I said it's exactly that. We can't take it this year because we had less than 12,000 cubic yards remaining for December. But starting January 1, we can start taking those event jobs, and we want to be able to be available for the local towns and for the Pemi-Baker District for those types of things. But that's just where we are. I mean, I've had contractors call me and we've had to turn them away. They've called Carberry, they've turned them away. It's just where we are right with today at the end of the year with everybody managing cubic yards. Everybody's at capacity. Starting January 1, we could take that tear down for sure. But that, I mean, moving forward, you know, 230,000 cubic yards if we're getting good compaction, which Donnie Dunn does a great job. It's 168,000 tons a year, because in that number is also your soils, your cover soils. You know, 6 inches of soil every day, 1 foot of intermediate cover, so, you know, 15–20% of your volume is actual soils or cover material. I mean, that's what we're limited to. So this year was our first year managing it, cubic yards. Next year we budgeted, we really paid attention and tried to not front load it, so we have wiggle room for exactly what you're talking about, those event jobs and those availabilities. You know, God forbid we have some type of disaster in the Northeast or New England or New Hampshire, and we have major flood debris or something like that. I don't know what we'll do as a state. We're at capacity already, and we don't have availability for large amounts of disposal. As you know, we've been very fortunate. We haven't had those events. And if I remember the last time Keene, New Hampshire, in the southern part of the state got hit probably 10 years ago with some flood debris, major flooding. Look at what happened in Vermont with Sandy. There was, you know, large amounts of material that needed to be disposed of. But we're capacity managing what we're producing right now without anything special going on.
Anything else from the board? Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me come down. I appreciate it. Anytime. You can reach out to me anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Try to take it easy.
I'll stick around.
At this time, we'll take public comments. Please be mindful of your 5 minutes. Are there any public comments from the public?
We can start, Jesse, just to let you know, we'll start in person and then we'll move virtually.
Okay.
Okay.
If you could just state your name.
My name is Wayne Morrison. I'm a resident of Whitefield, and I'm actually also president of a nonprofit grassroots organization that's called North Country Alliance for Balanced Change. And I think in your packet you have a sheet from us.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I just wanted to speak to you a little bit about, as I'm sure you are aware, there's a great deal of opposition to the Dalton project. That opposition is, in fact, specific to the site, but it's also a recognition of, for a very long time, the state of New Hampshire has been lagging, certainly its neighbors in other New England states. And part of the issue is that this discontinuity that's coming with NCES closing in 2026 or whenever that date happens, that creates both a challenge for all of you, but also an opportunity. And I know as a citizen and as a resident, Mr. Roy mentioned that some of us are on a learning curve, and I certainly put myself in that category. I've learned a lot in the last couple of years as I've gotten involved in this. And I just want to point out to you that, you know, there's a reason that there's so much opposition to this specific project, and that's citing a landfill next to a lake, next to a state park, and, you know, pristine place that represents so much of what New Hampshire is all about. We think is an unnecessary risk. And as we've looked at things, I know there's a need, or there's certainly this background noise about a crisis of capacity for landfills in New Hampshire. To the extent that there's any pressure on capacity, the overarching reason for that we believe, is that some of the for-profit out-of-state companies are dragging in out-of-state trash into our landfills, to the extent that now more than half of the trash going into some of our landfills is coming from out of state. So if you're feeling bad about your construction material not being able to go into Bethlehem, part of the reason for that is it's being filled up with Massachusetts trash or Massachusetts construction stuff. This is an opportunity for us to take a step back. We have time. There's not a crisis. There's expansions going on at other sites. We do not have to sacrifice pristine forests and wetlands in New Hampshire in large measure to satisfy contracts from other New England states. I would encourage you to think of this as an opportunity to make a change in the way we're doing business with our landfills in New Hampshire. And as a resident, this is a kind of, in some ways, this is a generational decision that's being made. If a landfill goes through in Dalton, we're going to live with that decision for 40, 50, maybe 100 years if there's expansion. And what you are doing, if that goes forward, is we're institutionalizing further that 49%, 50%, who knows, more of that trash that's going to go into our White Mountains is going to be coming from out of state, primarily from Massachusetts. We are very encouraged that the legislature is waking up. Those pieces of legislation that Mr. Roy talked about are long overdue. We need to make significant changes. Your district, and we understand and we recognize your need to manage costs and to satisfy your constituency, but we think there's a lot of different answers to how to do that. And whether it's other sites that the folks at Casella have, or whether that's Turnkey, or whether that's Mount Carberry, there's capacity. It's how we use it. And I would ask you to take a longer view and a strategic view. And as a resident of the state, we need to do what's best for New Hampshire, not what's best for Casella. And we would be more than happy to work with you and to share what we've learned. But we think this is a very, very important decision, and not just for this district, and not just for the North Country. We're bringing in all this trash. It's a leachate factory that ends up being trucked 100 miles south and ends up in the Merrimack River with all those chemicals that are, permanent. So this is a very big decision. Thank you for the time to talk to you. We'd love to get on your agenda next time and talk in some more detail. But we think this is a tremendous opportunity to make a step function change for the state of New Hampshire, not only to solve your district waste problem, but to put New Hampshire in a much better position so that we're not way behind, and we're not letting Massachusetts and Connecticut and other New England states dump on New Hampshire. It's time for us to step up and protect New Hampshire. Thank you.
Can I, Wayne? Wayne, do you have a second? Can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm Eric Rasmussen. Have you or your group looked at the state commerce laws regarding what we're allowed to refuse from other states? Now, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a certain amount that we cannot reject, yet for some reason Vermont seems to be able to do that. That was explained to me a while ago, because my feelings are very much in line with the way you feel. I don't feel that we should be taking out of state commerce or out of state trash, but I understand that there are certain laws that forbid us from stopping that altogether. Are you familiar with any of that?
So, this is one of the first questions I asked a couple of years ago when I started getting involved in this. And every time you say out-of-state trash, somebody mumbles something about the interstate commerce laws. And, I think what other states have done is to say that, well, that may be true if you have private for-profit companies running your landfills, that you have difficulties in stopping the flow of trash coming in from different states. I think Maine, I think Vermont, I think some other states have said, well, okay, maybe it's time for municipalities to run those landfills. There's other ways around this. I'm sure there's other legal arguments, but it's not it may be an obstacle, but it isn't something that can't be overcome. And it takes a strategy which the state of New Hampshire has not had, right? We've been asleep for the last and I don't mean this you guys are trying to solve problems where the state of New Hampshire, DES, the legislature has not been out in front of this thing. And the reason, big reason that we're living with rules and regulation and plans that are 20 years old or more. Meanwhile, our neighbors, Vermont, Maine, they're very aggressive. And there's no secret to why trash is coming to New Hampshire and why the economics allow it to go hundreds of miles. And we're talking about all the costs are going to go up if NCES closes. Well, somehow or other, the economics seem to work that we can ship it hundreds of miles up from Massachusetts and find a home for it in the White Mountains. And I think it's part of the combination of solving that problem. Out-of-state trash is the elephant in the landfill. It's something that people know. The more people hear that, my friends are amazed that we're allowing that to happen. And guess what? That's only going to get worse going forward, because all those other states, they're closing landfills. Putting a greenfield landfill in Dalton, nobody is making greenfield landfills. DES has never permitted a greenfield landfill. Nobody's put one of those in decades, and there's a reason for that. It's bad for the environment, it's bad for small business, it's bad for New Hampshire. And if we allow that to happen, we're creating a magnet that's going to suck in trash from all of New England. And we don't want that. We don't need that. There are other solutions to how you get your district and your constituencies, how you move that trash. And we're better off to focus on how we fix New Hampshire's problem. Because the truth is, there is no capacity issue for New Hampshire trash. It's only a problem because we're sucking in, we're bringing all these trailer loads up 93, and whether it's going turnkey, for example, there's 60 or 70% from Massachusetts. I don't know. NCES is 35, 40%.
Last year we were at 80% in-state. This year we're running higher than that.
Yeah, but the numbers I saw from the
biennial report.
How about the last 10 years? What's it been?
About 34%.
Can you just wrap it up? And
I'm sorry, I was responding to a question. If my passion is coming across, I hope you.
Yeah.
I am representing our group. The more you poke at this, the more you realize how unhappy and how passionate people in the state of New Hampshire are to not let this happen. And we're looking for better solutions, smarter solutions, and we need your help. We recognize you need to manage costs. We want to work with you on that, but the fact that NCES is closing is an opportunity. It is not a challenge. We will find a solution.
Thank you. So let me just put one little bug out there. Plasma gasification, we should all be looking at that for the future, but I'm not going to go into details on that.
maybe more comments from the sitting public?
All right, so first, Jesse, we have, looks like Representative Weston. And let's see, I think it's unmuted.
Yes, I'm here. First of all, I'd like to really commend the last speaker. I think he was very eloquent about talking about the opposition that those of us in New Hampshire have to this whole system. We should not be having an out-of-state company making money off of bringing out-of-state trash to dump here. It just doesn't make sense. And this has been brought up in the legislature before. We haven't been able to change it yet. In the meantime, there are a number of pieces of legislation to reduce, to divert waste that are on the books right now, including the bottle bill, construction and demolition, debris, recycling, and composting. Some of these have been championed by Tim Egan, who unfortunately is not here tonight. I'm a co-sponsor on some of this legislation, and I think those are things we should really be supporting. Peter Blair from the Conservation Law Foundation was here earlier, and unfortunately he had to leave early because of the delay in the meeting. But he wanted to encourage the district to embrace these bills to divert waste. So that would definitely help. But I agree totally that the state needs to think about why we want to be the depository for all the waste in the entire New England area. It just doesn't make sense for us to be doing that. So we need to think about this in the big picture. Beyond that, I can't add a lot to what the last speaker said. I agree with him totally. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Weston.
And, Suzanne Smith is next.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for hosting this and making it known to everyone to be here. I'm State Representative Suzanne Smith. I also serve Plymouth, Hebron, and Holderness with Representative Weston. And I have been very involved in trying to divert waste and lessen what we send to the landfill. And the Solid Waste Working Group, which was mentioned earlier this evening, is well underway, and they are meeting every couple of weeks. And this group will go on for 5 years. And a lot of what they're doing is putting together a solid waste plan and trying to solve some of the problems, which some are very difficult and some are not that difficult. But composting, encouraging more composting and trying to see if there are commercial composting facilities that could be set up in New Hampshire, because food waste is such a huge part of what goes into our landfills. Also the C&D issue, which has been brought up by the first speaker and Representative Weston. Yes, although we cannot, private companies such as Casella and Turnkey cannot refuse C&D waste from other states, but what other states have done is raise the cost of bringing the C&D waste to the facilities. So whether it's the facilities in their own state, for in-state people, or for out-of-state people. And for in-state people, it could encourage recycling rather than landfilling. And for out-of-state people, they may look somewhere else rather than to New Hampshire, which I was looking up some figures, and in 2005, it was estimated that 284,000 tons of C&D was dumped in New Hampshire, and about a third of that was from out of state. And that is more than what the stage 6 at NCES will be permitted to accept for a year. So I mean, C&D is a huge issue, and further recycling of that could be good. Bottle bill that Representative Weston mentioned, we're the only state that does not have a deposit on returnables, which could be in Maine, it's wine bottles, water bottles, and it really does divert things from the waste stream, especially if the deposit is high enough. Those are my comments on how we can reduce waste going into landfills, but also the idea of putting a huge landfill near a state park where the trucks are going to be driving not only on the interstate, but they're going to be driving through downtown Bethlehem to get to the Dalton landfill. And the Department of Parks, which runs the Forest Lake State Park, they have huge concerns and wrote a letter almost a year ago saying that they're concerned about animals coming into the park and ruining the park experience. Seagulls, which as we all know, tend to flock around landfills. So there are a lot of reasons why not, they have been spoken about earlier, so I won't go into it, but definitely, we should be reducing the number of landfills we have and figuring out how to divert the waste. And I believe that the solid waste working group and some of the bills that are being introduced this year would be very helpful for that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we have, Sarah.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I too am appreciative of this public comment opportunity, and I just have a couple minor points based on things other folks have said. I too very much endorse what Mr. Morrison has shared with you tonight, and although Casella's out-of-state volume may be reduced at this time, it has been more in past years, as you will see if you go to the biennial report from the state. And the most important point in that regard is that the projection for the Granite State Landfill in Dalton from Casella's proposal is that they will take up to 49% of their capacity for out-of-state trash. So that's in the plan for the new landfill. Secondly, I just want to mention a lot of people have spoken about Forest Lake and the State Park, which are absolute gems. However, it's good to know also that this proposed GSL facility is literally set in the watershed of the Ammonoosuc River, which flows right down to Littleton within a few miles, and it's the center of Littleton's famed and growing river district. So even as Forest Lake is threatened, the Ammonoosuc watershed is probably the most obvious immediate threat. And that site drains in that direction, as everybody admits. The last thing is, I mean, you've mentioned traffic briefly in Bethlehem, but my town is Whitefield, and it's adjacent to Carroll. And with the routes that the Casella organization has proposed, my town and Carroll are expecting to see 100 trash hauling vehicles a day coming in, and that same 100 going out, so over 200 round trips daily, and that doesn't count the leachate tankers. My village center will be utterly devastated if this project goes through, so I won't go on and on, but there's a lot at stake, and I think that's one of the points that we want to make as you folks at Pemi-Baker are doing your forward thinking and advanced planning. So again, thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to this conversation continuing statewide and not just with you folks, but north to south, we're all going to be impacted ongoing if this project proceeds. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have for public comment virtually.
One comment, members, after adjournment, just give me a couple minutes, do a little bit of paperwork and we finish. Any further comments, discussion?
Anybody got a comment? I'd just like to make an observation. And in order to reduce the amount of NSW going to landfills, C&D, whatever, going to landfills, there are a lot of good things going on about recycling. You know, it's all recycling. Well, the more that we recycle, the more pressure it puts upon everybody's facility, right? Markets aren't always there. Storage isn't always there. There's all of these logistical problems with recycling. Space, you know, all that kind of stuff. Especially composting. the amount of stuff that we have to recycle. And I never see any pressure put on, companies for packaging. And Christmas is coming, and everybody's ordering from Amazon. You know? And most of the stuff, some of it's recyclable, some of it isn't. You know, and how much of it, because people get frustrated, because it's not that easy. You know, your Amazon package isn't that easy, because some of the stuff can recycle and some of it can't. And it's a pain. And I never see anything, and this is I'll just throw it out there, I never see anything in any literature or any argument but packaging. And I think that's a huge, huge mistake. Just put it out there.
So, give you a caveat to that is, everybody forgets, you know, in the recycling triad, the 3 R's. Recycling is the most expensive way to do anything other than just throwing it away. It's sometimes cheaper to throw it away. You know, reduction. Reduction is the best way. Any other comments?
Jess, you have 2 more hands raised virtually if you want to take those.
Yes.
I don't know who was first, so we'll start with Representative Smith.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just couldn't help myself, but I did want to respond to, we have to reduce what we are using and reduce the packaging. Maine just became the first state to pass an extended producer liability responsibility law, which over time will, instead of the consumer paying for a bottle and then getting a deposit back, the extended producer liability law will charge manufacturers, large manufacturers, not your little mom and pops, a tax, so to speak, or a fee, depending on the amount of packaging they use. And this will encourage manufacturers to figure out ways to use less packaging. So that's one thing that's happening in that direction, since we know that reducing use is a lot better than having to recycle at the end. So I just thought I'd share that. And there is a bill in the New Hampshire House this year to study to see whether that could work in New Hampshire, whether it is a good idea for us to go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Representative Weston?
Hi, thank you, Representative Smith, for that, because it's nice to know what's happening in our neighbor states in terms of this issue. I'm a little bit aghast that the prior speaker didn't know anything about the efforts that have taken place in the past, because as a 72-year-old, I've been fighting this battle forever, and I think a lot of the battles that we've had in the past have been somewhat effective. If you notice, when you take food out of the restaurant now, a lot of times it doesn't come in a styrene foam container, it comes in a compostable container. There's, even places like McDonald's has reduced its packaging. There's a long, long way for us to go. And the story with Amazon is really a problem, because the scope of Amazon's business has grown so fast and is taking over commerce at such a rate, maybe partly because of COVID. So that is something that we are going to have to deal with in the future. But I know, having ordered from them, you get everything in these huge boxes. You'll have a little tiny piece of product in an enormous box. And that's something we're going to have to really work on. It's kind of getting out of our control. But that isn't to say that we're giving up. there's been a lot of work being done on this issue, and it's gonna continue. So open your ears, it's out there. A lot of people are working on reducing waste, from the source, not at the point where we throw it away. So we need everybody to join in with us and try to stop it at the source. So I hope you help us. Thanks.
Make a motion for adjournment?